April 20th, 2010. 11 workers died and 17 were seriously injured by an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon, an offshore drilling rig located approximately 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. The rig burned for 2 days, eventually sinking and triggering the largest oil spill in U.S. history as oil and gas spewed up from the sea floor.
That disaster happened on a rig drilling for BP, and it changed the company's future forever. The image of a raging inferno on the ocean became tied to the energy giant. BP, short for British Petroleum, is one of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. Headquartered in London, it's been a major player in global energy markets for over a century, powering homes, cars, and at times, controversy. But in April of 2010, the Deepwater Horizon disaster was a major turning point. Since then, BP has struggled to find its footing. After the disaster, there's only been a string of failed promises and a lack of direction. The company vowed to go green, but it pulled back. Their new CEO even admitted that expectations around the clean energy transition may have been, in his words, quote, misplaced. Meanwhile, BP's latest quarter paints a grim picture. Profits plunged 48%, its strategy chief has resigned, and its share price still lags behind competitors. These setbacks have left BP caught between its fossil fuel legacy and an uncertain future. While no one is going to shed a tear for a giant oil company, the case of BP is an interesting study in how reckless decisions can damage a business and even cost the lives of innocent people. So how did it get to this point? How did one of the most powerful oil companies in the world lose its direction? The answers go way beyond a single explosion. Years of cost-cutting, mismanagement, leadership shakeups, and short-term thinking may have shaped what happened in 2010. But even after the oil stopped spilling, the damage never really stopped. In this episode, we take a look at the corporate disaster that is BP.
You are watching ColdFusion TV.
But before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. ColdFusion episodes are now available on Spotify, so you can watch them there if you prefer. 2010 marked a turning point in BP's history, which stretches back all the way to 1909. At the center of this turning point was the Deepwater Horizon. It was a massive offshore drilling rig designed to operate in extreme conditions. It was capable of reaching reservoirs buried thousands of feet beneath the ocean floor. At the time, it was one of the most advanced rigs in the world. The rig was working at a site nearly 5,000 feet or 1.5 kilometers below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. It was about 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. BP was the main operator, overseeing a deepwater well known as Macondo. They had partnered with Transocean, which owned and operated the rig, and Halliburton, the contractor responsible for sealing the well with cement. On the surface, everything seemed to be going according to plan, but on April 20th, all of that would change. Oil and gas had begun to accumulate inside the well, and then, without warning, it surged up a drill column. The gas ignited, and instantly, the rig violently exploded. 11 workers were killed, 17 others were seriously injured, and 2 days later, the rig sank to the ocean floor. And then, the oil started spilling. Over the next 87 days, an estimated 130 million gallons of oil, or almost 200 Olympic swimming pools, leaked into the Gulf of Mexico. It spread quickly, covering more than 43,000 square miles, or 110,000 square kilometers. That's roughly the size of the state of Virginia. Over 1,300 miles, or 2,000 kilometers of shoreline were contaminated across 5 states. The world had never seen such a vivid and widespread ecological disaster. Wildlife across the region, from birds to turtles, to deep-sea coral, fish, and marine mammals were devastated. Scientists say that the full extent of the damage was never fully understood. Even now, more than a decade later, long-term restoration projects are still underway. BP is expected to continue paying out $20 billion in a legal settlement until 2031.
It was really hard to watch the oil spew into the Gulf. I mean, we're looking at over 1 million gallons a day. At some points in time, it felt like there was no end in sight. I saw a lot of areas of shoreline that were coated in thick, fresh oil. The fumes coming off of the marshes were sometimes overwhelming. Just watching all this unfold for the 87 days that the oil continued to flow out into the Gulf, You could see that floating oil slick from space every day. And you know that oil's going to be there for a long time.
But that's not even the full cost they'll have to pay, but we'll get to that later. Besides environmental damage, the broader impact was systemic. The scale of the fallout was hard to ignore. But this wasn't just a random accident. There were plenty of warning signs. The decisions that led to this moment were being made weeks, months, years, and even decades before the explosion. So what exactly happened behind the scenes? In the years before the Deepwater Horizon explosion, BP was under intense pressure. Oil prices were climbing, and that's good for the company. But what was also climbing was the expectations. Investors wanted faster drilling, bigger returns, and fewer delays. After all, maximizing shareholder value is all that matters in the modern day. A few years earlier, BP's then CEO, John Brownie, launched aggressive cost-cutting reduction programs. Now this did help boost profits, but also left BP with fewer safety resources and aging infrastructure.
The pressure to cut costs came from the very top of BP. After the buyout of Amoco, Tony Hayward's predecessor, Lord John Brown, ordered a 25% cost cut across the company. The message was relayed down through the ranks.
I don't know if they realized just how devastating the cost-cutting ethos was when it actually played out in the field. When there's a whisper at the top of the company, it becomes like a shout at the bottom.
You were starting to hear a little bit more about make do with what you got and try to make it more efficient. So you were taking older equipment and pushed it to a hilt. Hey, if something didn't blow up, it was a good day.
Now BP already had a questionable safety record. To see this, we need to look no further than BP's Texas City refinery. Since 1974, 23 people sadly lost their lives in 20 separate accidents at this one refinery. 3 of these occurred in 2004, and the same year, due to massive cost-cutting, the refinery was BP's most profitable, with over $1 billion in profit. And safety at BP had already declined since the early 90s, because BP wanted to cut operational costs by 25%. This meant reduced maintenance, less training, and a cutback in safety staff. The Texas refinery complied with the cost-cutting measures, and it showed. An external inspection report of the facility in January of 2005 found, quote, broken alarms, thinned pipe, chunks of concrete falling, bolts dropping, cigarettes falling 60 feet or 18 meters, and staff being overcome with fumes. We have never seen a site where the notion, I could die today, was so real, end quote. The report also found that employees were praised and rewarded for sticking to the budget, and that was the priority. Sadly, this would all come to a head just 2 months later in March of 2005. A massive explosion at the refinery would kill 15 workers. As you'll later see, cost-cutting followed by a disaster was a pattern of behavior for BP. 2 years later, BP's pipelines in Alaska leaked more than 200,000 gallons of crude, resulting in a $25 million fine. So when BP turned its focus to deepwater drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, those same cost-cutting pressures followed, and from the start, the Deepwater Horizon drilling well, Macondo, was troubled. Equipment failures, unstable formations, and delays piled up. By the 20th of April, drilling was already 45 days behind schedule and $58 million over budget. That pressure showed in decisions made on the rig. A lot of things went wrong on April the 20th, 2010, but I'll just highlight a few major issues without getting too technical. First, the cement job. Halliburton, the contractor, used a lighter than usual cement mixture. It had already failed stability tests, and it was known that it was prone to gas leaks. But BP, seeing the cheaper cost, went ahead with it anyway. Then came the pressure test. It was the final check to make sure that the cement had sealed the well. The results were inconsistent. Some readings showed pressure building when it shouldn't have. But instead of halting operations to investigate, BP realized that time was money. So they chose to interpret the data as normal and keep going. And then came the shortcut that sealed the rig's fate. BP swapped out the dense drilling mud in the well with much lighter seawater before installing the final cement plug. That drastically reduced the pressure inside the well, making it easier for methane to surge upwards. And that's exactly what happened. Gas shot up from the well, reached the drilling floor, and ignited in a massive explosion. In the chaos, crew members tried to activate the blowout preventer. It's a stack of giant valves designed to seal a well in the case of an emergency. But of course, due to poor maintenance, it failed. Moreover, Investigators later discovered multiple design flaws and a dead battery in a key control system.
Things had gone wrong here from the beginning. A worker had called the project a nightmare, the well from hell. Internal documents show that BP engineers were debating how to cut costs on a project that was already way over budget.
Every indication was that the well that blew out, it was already $10 million over, and to get caught doing a remedial cement job and going back in there and doing all this work was another $10 million, and it was going to impact them. So they were cutting corners on an operation side, trying to get by with less.
BP bypassed a key test called a cement bond log. BP saved more than $100,000. BP cut the number of centralizers used to secure and plug the well. This saved over $1 million.
So from afar, while the explosion may have looked like a sudden accident, the real story was years in the making. It was driven by corporate culture obsessed with cutting costs, speeding up operations, and pushing the limits of safety, and they pushed too far. This risky and horrific mindset had finally caught up with BP.
I was actually on the phone with my wife. After I hung the phone up with her, a very short time later, I hear the engines revving. The lights are glowing. I'm hearing the alarms. I mean, they're at a constant state now. It's just beep, 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 beep. It doesn't stop. But even that's starting to get drowned out by the sound of the engine increasing in speed. And my lights get so incredibly bright that they physically explode. I'm pushing my way back from the desk when my computer monitor exploded. I thought then that we simply may have just an engine that ran away. Somehow, some way, it just ran away. And when it did, eventually something's gonna tear up internally and it's gonna stop. But I knew that there was getting ready to be a huge investigation and there was gonna be a lot of work to go on to figure all this out. So I proceeded to make my way to the ECR so that I can assist the engineer with what's going on, see if we can diagnose what happened or what have you.
The man you just heard is Mike Williams. He was the rig's chief electronics technician and a survivor. By June 2010, federal authorities had launched a full-scale civil and criminal investigation. It would take nearly 2 years, thousands of documents, and hours of testimony to piece together what really happened. The charges that followed were serious. They included violations of the Clean Water Act, gross negligence, and false reporting about the size of the spill. Now we do have to remember that 3 companies were behind the disaster. BP was the operator and majority owner. Transocean owned and ran the rig, and Halliburton handled the cement job. With so many parties involved, the shifting of blame was inevitable.
If each of you would stand.
The president of BP America may have taken responsibility today.
We will carry out our responsibilities.
But he wasn't about to take all the blame.
BP, as a leaseholder and the operator of the well, hired Transocean to drill that well.
That didn't sit well with the head of Transocean, who was seated just next to him. He signaled that the massive explosion may have stemmed from a mistake made by a subcontractor, Halliburton.
These events occurred after the well construction process was essentially complete.
The Halliburton executive sitting next to him pointed the finger back at BP.
In 2014, a US district judge finally delivered a decisive ruling. BP was found reckless. The judge assigned the company the majority of the blame for the disaster. That ruling meant that BP faced the stiffest penalties under the Clean Water Act, with fines potentially reaching up to $18 billion. The focus also turned to prosecuting those individuals deemed responsible for preventable deaths. 2 BP supervisors aboard the rig, Bob Calazar and Donald Vidrine, faced manslaughter charges. They were accused of ignoring warning signs about the gas leaks and allowing risky work to proceed.
This prosecution moves away from the BP spill's environmental and economic impacts. Instead, it addresses the preventable deaths of 11 people.
Bob Kaluza oversaw safety for BP aboard the Deepwater Horizon when the rig exploded.
I did not cause this tragedy. I am innocent, and I put my trust, reputation, and future in the hands of the judge and the jury.
Donald Vidrine, another BP senior supervisor aboard the rig, also pleaded not guilty. They were in charge of a test that indicated combustible gas had seeped into the well. The indictment alleges Kaluza and Vidrine didn't call engineers on shore to discuss the abnormal readings as required. Instead, they allowed work on the well to go on. Hours later, volatile gas came up the well and exploded.
I'm angry that the two middle management guys are going to take the fall.
Kaluza's lawyer claimed that he was a scapegoat. Survivors like Stephen Stone expressed frustration that only middle management was targeted and that higher-ups escaped accountability. In 2015, however, federal prosecutors dropped the manslaughter charges against Bob and Donald. No one from BP's senior leadership ever faced criminal conviction. Some were investigated, a few were called to testify, but in the end, they all walked away without any jail time. So yes, top executives got away once again, but the struggle for BP, the company itself, never really ended. Lawsuits faded, the headlines moved on, but the company itself never quite recovered. In April of 2025, the company reported a net profit of $1.38 billion. It sounds like a lot, but it was a sharp 48% drop from the year before. BP's head of strategy stepped down, and with that, there's a lot of questions about where the company's heading. Meanwhile, since its early push into renewables in 2020, the company's share price has consistently underperformed its rivals. Even after transitioning back to oil and gas, BP still trails behind Shell and Exxon. And furthermore, debt is a huge problem for the company. Officially, BP says it owes about $27 billion, but when you include hybrid bonds, lease obligations, and legacy spill liabilities, the real figure climbs closer to $65 billion. The company's past bets in Russia haven't helped either. Before the war in Ukraine, BP held a nearly 20% stake in Rosneft, a Russian state-controlled oil giant. When the conflict began, BP took a $25 billion write-down and announced its exit. Under the new CEO, BP is revising its green transition. Spending on renewables has been slashed by $5 billion. Investment in oil and gas has jumped by $10 billion a year. Some see this as a necessary correction, while others call it a step backwards. BP, however, sees it as a fundamental reset. The goal is to sell off $20 billion in assets, reduce debt, and get back to what they call their core business. It's a bold reset, but judging by the numbers, regaining investor trust isn't going to be easy. Their public image is low, even for an oil company. It seems in the case of BP, it's the closest that we'll get to the most extreme example of putting profits over people, except for Boeing, of course. The tension between profit and responsibility sits at the heart of BP's struggle, but there's no getting around it. In their history, they've been extremely negligent, chasing profits at the cost of safety and even human lives. So what do you guys think? Do you think BP can truly reinvent itself? Or are they still going to keep paying the price for that disaster? BP may have been negligent in their business practices, but you don't have to be negligent in how you consume the news. It's constantly getting harder to get to the truth of any news story, so today's sponsor, Ground News, is helping with that. Ground News gives you different viewpoints on news in a data-driven, objective way. Using this story of Nvidia's valuation passing the $4 trillion mark as an example, over 500 news outlets covered this story. Their biased distribution chart shows me the political leanings of those news outlets, and I can even get a summary of how the news story is being framed. Left-leaning outlets look at Nvidia's $4 trillion market cap as a symbol of American innovation and the AI revolution. The right, on the other hand, highlights that Nvidia's success is proof of Trump's policies paying off. Let's look at some sources and see how the issue is being framed. On the left, Infobay states, markets rise despite tariff tensions as Nvidia makes history surpassing $4 trillion. On the right, the US Sun frames it as, AI giant Nvidia reaches $4 trillion in market value, more than the UK's GDP. Scrolling down, I can compare every single article on the topic with convenient tags showing me the context about the source, like how factual it is and who owns it. On the right-hand side of the screen, we can see the bias distribution, 26% left, 57% centre, and 18% right. I find Ground News to be a valuable tool when researching, especially with more controversial topics. It makes it much easier to have a well-rounded understanding of any topic versus manually looking for opposing views to contrast. Ground News' blind spot feed is also great. This shows you stories that are underreported by one side of the political spectrum. For example, if you're on the left, you may have missed the story about how a Republican representative says that the Epstein files have been destroyed. Ground News is a fantastic tool for getting international views, sifting through misinformation, and identifying media bias. They provide all the tools you need to be a critical thinker. Today, Ground News is offering 40% off, and this comes with a feature called My News Bias. so you can even check how your news viewing habits change over time. To get started, go to ground.news/coldfusion. Thanks. Anyway, that's about it from me. My name is Dagogo, and you've been watching Cold Fusion, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.